Something most of us have been guilty of, one time or another, is getting a little bit too stuck into the lightweight kit debate. Now, I'm not here to tell you that you should be ditching all of your lightweight kit for something super heavy, so don't get rid of your lightweight nylon tent in place of a cotton canvas tent, but maybe in the right circumstances, that's something you should consider. Light is right? Well, not always. The lightweight, right weight debate is something that we think more outdoor enthusiasts should be considering for their next overnight adventure. Around me here, I've got a selection of kit both on the lightweight side of things and potentially the right weight choices that you might make in their place. Obviously, this is all dependent on the style of adventure you're going on, where you're going, what you're doing. But sometimes that right weight choice might make things a little bit more comfortable for you, get you a few extra luxuries for the sake of carrying a little bit more weight. So we'll go through everything here. And as I say, these are just examples that we've got in front of us. They're not exactly what we maybe would ideally recommend because personal preference comes into play. We've got many different brands. But hopefully these examples here will stand to put you in line with the lightweight, right weight thing. We'll start with arguably the most important, which is shelter. Our lightweight option is a bivy. In this case, the Outdoor Research AscentShell bivy, coming in at 528 grams. This is a standalone bivy in this instance. You could add a tarp in and some pegs for another 500 grams to have a little bit more of an adaptable setup, which could be the compromise. On the right weight side of things, we have the Fjäriven Abisko Frøyluft 2, which comes in at just over 2 kilos, arguably 4 times as heavy as the bivy. Now, why might you want to choose a two-man tent over a bivy? Well, a lot more room in that. That one being a two-man tent, you can have a friend along, human or four-legged. You've got room to do some admin, you've got porches to store your kit. It's just a much more pleasant place to be if the weather turns. Whereas in the bivy, once you're in it, you're lying down, you're in it, you're bedding down for the night. However, that is going to be much more capable of your stealth missions where you might be wild camping, you want to keep a low profile, or you want to travel as light and fast as possible. That's definitely not going to afford you that, especially in this rather fetching blue. There are alternatives as well, so you could drop to a one-man tent. This is my personal preference. I would go for a two-man tent just because I am 6'3". I appreciate a little bit more space. I appreciate being able to sit up and have room by the side of me. But equally, if I was out in the right conditions, I might still be using a bivy, but I would be adding a tarp in so that I have a little bit more space, a little bit more coverage, so that when it comes to the end of the day, if I've got a few hours to kill at camp, I don't have to be inside my bivy or out completely exposed to the elements. Now that you've got your shelter sorted, next step will be your sleep system. Sleeping bags are a good place to start with that, and this is where a lot of people will find that they will potentially try and make some weight savings by going for a lightweight option over potentially a right weight option, sacrificing comfort for a smaller and lighter pack size. So in this case, we've got 2 sleeping bags from Sea to Summit. The lightweight option for us is a Spark -1, and then we have an Ascent -1 as our right weight option. Both of these bags go down to the same temperature rating, but the lightweight option Spark comes in at sub 500 grams, has a very small pack size, and uses 850 fill power down, so will pack down very small, very compact, very lightweight. However, it is also quite tapered, so this is the main difference between these two bags, apart from the Ascent using 750 fill down, so slightly lower quality fill power down, so it is a little bit heavier, coming in at about 780 grams. But the shape of these bags is where they really change, so you get quite an aggressive and slim taper with the Spark bag, which is more efficient, it's more thermally efficient to keep you warm, but isn't necessarily as comfortable. Some people don't have issue with that, and if you're in a bivy, a more tapered sleeping bag is probably going to be your friend because you're already in that kind of tapered shape, versus something like the Ascent that has a more gentle taper. It also has a few other features, so it has a free flow zip system that Sea to Summit are really rather good at, that allows you to make the bag much more adaptable. It's also still considered very lightweight because it is still sub 1 kilo. Coming in at 780 grams, it's not by any means a heavy bag, and this is going to be a lot more comfortable, especially when you combine it with a slightly wider sleeping mat, which we'll come on to next. Now, as I just alluded to, the sleeping mat is also a very important part of the sleep system. It can make the difference between a good night's sleep and sleeping at all in the outdoors. Now, on the lightweight side of things, this example is a Therm-A-Rest NeoAir UberLight, which comes in at sub 250 grams, which for an inflatable mat is pretty phenomenal. Versus our Nemo mat here, so we've got a tensor insulated. This one happens to be a regular wide mat. And this is the major difference between them. So if the mats will now magically move across so that we can see the difference in shape, this is where it really comes in key here. So something like the Therm-A-Rest is very tapered. It's also quite narrow, and especially if you are a slightly bigger human like myself, or you just prefer a little bit more comfort, you can find that the tapered edges on this aren't quite as comfortable. Now obviously if you are in a bivvy, then a tapered mat makes a little bit more sense because you're not really going to be moving around much again, also in line with having that more tapered sleeping bag. However, the Nemo mat in a regular wide is rectangular, so you get a little bit more space, it feels a little bit more comfortable, you're less likely to roll off the edge of it, and it just overall feels a little more comfortable. I'm already paying a weight penalty by having to go for the long version of these mats, so I might as well go for a long wide and have a much more comfortable night's sleep. It just seems like a logical choice for me. If I want a good night's sleep in the outdoors, I'm going to be picking the Rightweight mat over a lightweight mat. So now you've made it to camp, you've potentially got a few hours to kill before you end up going to bed. So what do you want to do in that time? You probably want to sit down, rest your weary legs, and cook up some dinner. With that in mind, you could go for the lightweight option, something like this Exped SitPad. Folds down, super small, weighs next to nothing, is damn near indestructible, and works quite well to keep you sat and dry. Now it's just comfortable, it's really small, and it works really well for the right type of adventure. Or you go for the Rightweight option, which might be considered a little bit more luxury depending on where you're going, what you're doing, for something like this Nemo Moonlight chair. Let's go. Now, I've chosen to sit in the moonlight for this because it's a little bit more comfortable, it feels a little bit more conversational for the camera. I would potentially use this if I was out with a few different people. You know, if I was out camping in a group, it's a little bit more conversational, it's a little bit more comfortable to sit in if you're going to be sat in it for longer periods of time, and yes, it's a little bit heavier, but if you're carrying a chair, you're probably splitting some of the rest of the weight with multiple people, so you might not all be carrying an individual stove, you might only have one between two of you, one between three of you. So there are other ways that you can make that weight saving. So for something a little bit more comfortable, for the right adventure, makes more sense. However, most of the time I will just end up taking a seat pad like this because it's really versatile, packs down super small, and I don't even know I'm carrying it. When it comes to coffee and cooking for some in the outdoors, that's where it can get a little bit more complicated, and where I certainly would potentially move more towards the Rightweight option rather than the lightweight. In the lightweight field, we have the Jetboil stash. So all of this will stash down into the pot itself, and that's your very small, lightweight cooking solution. And along with that, some instant coffee for the morning will do the trick, and dehydrated food. Dehydrated food has the advantage of being lighter in your pack because it doesn't contain any of the water. So provided you can get all of the water that you need en route, you add water into this and away you go. You get a nice delicious meal to eat in the outside simply by boiling some water, pouring in, waiting, consuming. These Firepot ones are actually quite nice. If we go over to the Rightweight side of things, we have something like the Primus Light Plus, which essentially does the same thing as a Jetboil stash, but is a little bit more adaptable, a little bit more versatile. So it is heavier, it is a bigger pack size. All of this does stash down into the Primus, but along with the pot, you do also get an integrated cup, so that's one thing you don't need to bring along, but you can bring another cup, in this case a collapsible one, with you as well. And an easy swap out for food, for something that maybe tastes a little bit better, depending on your preferences, but is heavier to begin with, is wet food. So the difference here, the Firepot comes in at about 110 grams versus about 300 grams for the Wayfarer wet food here. You are going to be carrying in your water either way or finding water along the way, so the difference there may come down to your personal preference on whether you want a wet meal or a dehydrated meal. But with the Primus stove, you get accessories that can make that difference, especially when it comes to coffee. So you can get things like a coffee press, which turns this stove essentially into a French press. So you get much better coffee in the morning, which in my case makes me more pleasant to be around. So I would always go for the coffee option. This stove is also more adaptable. You get little standoffs with the stove itself that are integrated into the strap, so you can use this with extra pots and pans. This is still considered quite a lightweight setup. There is a little bit of a weight difference between these two, but it's not massively significant. This setup is just a little bit more adaptable. You can even go one step further, which is something you might want to do if you're in a large group and sort of embrace your inner fell foodie. You can bring along chopping boards, knives, a bunch of fresh ingredients, and have a proper cookout with more stoves. Now everything so far has to go into a pack, and again you have that lightweight versus Rightweight debate. For our lightweight option, we have the Black Diamond Beta Light 45, also available in a 30. This one uses some pretty funky fabric on it. It uses a form of ultra high molecular weight polyethylene, which, to be a little bit easier to say, is branded as Challenge Sailcloth, in this case their Ultra 200 fabric. What this essentially means is it's a very lightweight fabric that is gram for gram 15 times stronger than steel, at least in their claims. But what that really means is it's just a super durable, bit of ASMR there, super durable fabric that is lightweight and works really well and is definitely up to task. Now with the Black Diamond pack, its base weight is around the 900 grams, just shy of mark. But that is strippable down to something that is much lighter. So basically everything on this pack can be removed within reason. So any of the adjustment straps on the side for cinching down, you can strip the waist belt. So you can make this very, very light. And despite being as light as it is, it carries really well. It is very comfortable and is essentially just a big dry bag with some comfortable straps on it. So a good lightweight option there. On the flip side of that, we have something like, stay there. We have the Osprey Atmos AG50. This is actually my personal pack that I've used on a lot of longer adventures. And I chose it because despite being heavier, coming in around the 2 kilo mark, so twice the weight of this guy, it does have a little bit of a bigger capacity, but on balance, you're probably going to be carrying slightly lighter, smaller kit in this, so you don't need that extra 5 litres. This is really comfortable. The carry system on it, so the anti-gravity system, makes this a very comfortable carrying bag and you don't really notice that extra weight. It's also little quality of life features like it's got side access zips, which for accessing kit when you're out and about is really useful for me. I found it much more useful to have that access at the side to be able to grab things because I can then pack my bag how I want to rather than necessarily just having to reach in straight from the top. It's a personal preference thing with how you pack your bag. If I was packing a bag like that, a little bit more like I would say a climbing pack, then I would pack it differently to this, and you just have to remember that from an access point of view. Something like this is also great for kit admin because you've got so many pockets. You can put things in the relevant pockets, know where they are. With that, you just do the same thing with dry bags. So there are different options and choices here on how you're carrying this kit, and depending on the adventure, I'm probably going to start choosing something like this because this is a really nice pack and it surprised me at how comfortable it was to carry. So I think I need to go on some long-term adventures with a lighter pack. So now we've got everything from the two setups into their respective packs. Again, I will point out that this isn't everything that you'd expect to take on an overnighter. This is just an example of some of the bigger items where you're likely going to see the biggest weight differences in your kit. You will still need to pack your clothes, your food, your water, med kits, anything else that you feel is an essential, which will bring that weight up. This is just an example of some of the major items that you'd expect in the pack. So take these figures with a pinch of salt because your bags will be heavier than this when you take them out. But let's see where we're at with these two. So we'll start with lightweight. Coming in at bang on 3 kilos. Now these aren't the most accurate scales in the world, but 3 kilos for pretty much all of the essentials for an overnight kit minus your food and water and clothes. It's really not bad going at all. Now the Rightweight. This one I know is going to be heavier. Let's see just how much heavier. Let that set a little bit, comes in at 7.8 kilos. So you're over twice the weight. Coming at 7.8 kilos versus 3 kilos, that is statistically significant. You will notice a difference between carrying this and that. And this is where Rightweight becomes much down to your personal preference as anything else. Because while we have these two setups here, my Rightweight is probably somewhere in between the two. So if you give me a minute, I'm going to make a few changes to a couple of these packs and then we're going to reweigh one of them and see where we're at for something that is my Rightweight from the selection that we've got here.
A few moments later.
So after a little change around, I've swapped out a few things and I swapped over from the Atmos, which was the Rightweight option, to the UberLight. So there's quite a saving there already. I have kept the tent. I've swapped to dehydrated food rather than a wet meal. And I'm keeping the Ascent sleeping bag, also swapping out to the SitPad rather than the chair. And the pack feels a lot lighter. A few big savings there, but I'm still keeping a few luxuries. So let's see where we're at. As it stands, that's coming in at 5.1 kilos. For argument's sake, with the accuracy of the scale, it's coming in at 5 kilos to keep it a nice round number. That sits pretty much bang in the middle of the two setups at their right weight and lightweight. And this is my right weight setup of what I would choose from the kit that we've got here. Your mileage may vary. You may decide that you want to go with the Bivy. You may add a tarp in. This is where personal preference comes into play with what you're doing with all of your kit. And that's really what it comes down to. The right weight for me might not be the right weight for you. But hopefully this video has helped open your eyes a little bit to the possibilities of comfort. Maybe take that extra thing. It's going to be a little bit heavier, but you might enjoy yourself a little bit more. Or stick with the lightweight. You do you.